How does a business go from boom to bust? Listen in as the two business guys mastermind on a company that did just that, and how they give you tips and tricks to keep yours from doing the same. Enjoy. This business podcast, the two business guys mastermind, uncovers for you secrets and share tips and tricks to entrepreneurship as they mastermind on how to have startup, operational, and overall business success so that you can go on to get better results. Enjoy. Great. Hey, John, man, welcome back to today. The two business guys are going to be masterminding on something, and we read over the weekend about a company that was headed toward a $40 billion IPO, everybody. $40 billion IPO. And now it's declaring bankruptcy. So when I saw the article, John, and it was about Greensill Capital, I saw this article and I asked myself, how does a company go from, perhaps getting a $40 billion IPO to going bankrupt? And I started thinking about, for small businesses, what kind of bombs do they have in their businesses? And they called this guy, they said he had a whole bunch of time bombs in his business. And at any given moment, they could have erupted and just, unwound the company. And this is exactly what happened. So Greensill Capital, his big deal is that he supplied money in the supply chain finance area, right? So an example of that, John, would be that let's say you are selling something to a car companies, right? And car companies are famous for not paying you on time, right? They will net 30 you, 210 net 30 you to death, right? Mm-hmm. So in the between time, you've got people to pay, you got suppliers on your side to pay, you've got employees to pay. So what this guy would do is come in and says, hey, we'll give you 90 cents on that dollar. And they make money on the 10%. You get paid, you take your, you know what I mean? They were able to, they're basically making money on the spread, right? Sounds reasonable. We've heard of factoring companies that do the same thing. You got a lot of inventory and they go, okay, well, we'll give you this amount of money on your inventory. Okay, great. I can make payroll now. Banks do it too, right? They give you a little bit of a loan. So you make payroll. When you get your money in from wherever you just sold to, you pay it off. And they get a little bit of percentage on that. Well, this company goes just bust, man. And what was so devastating about it, I read that in one town, or it was 26 towns in Germany, that were stand to lose $300 million in deposits. $300 million in deposits because, this was a Greensill owned bank. And of course, people put their money in the bank and they go, okay, I know it's protected up to a certain amount, but what if somebody put in more than that amount? So coming off the table here, because everything went bankrupt, they could lose $300 million. Another one was people that invested in him, right? Invested. SoftBank might lose $2 billion. Citibank, they had invested in a $10 billion fund, right? So I'm curious, when they talk about time bombs, right? And as we think about businesses out here, how many businesses are creating these kind of bombs in their business, right? And then how can we, mastermind on this and maybe offer some ways to diffuse that? What are some of the things you can think of, John? Off the top of my head, I'm thinking if a business gets too much credit before they're getting revenues.
Absolutely. Capital would be one, either too much in mismanagement of that capital, or on the reverse side, not having access to capital.
So not having access to capital. In other words, something comes up and they can't, and we hear this a lot, right? Scale the business. In other words, you can't even fulfill your orders and
Right.
grow because you don't have access to capital.
Absolutely. Poor decision making. I mean, uh, that could be anything from embezzlement to investing the money, the capital within the business in the wrong thing. So opening up divisions that don't contribute to the core, they
Mm.
take away from your core and suck up all of the revenue from that.
Oh, I think
Um,
that's a good one, John. We should probably stick there for a second. Especially with entrepreneurs, right? And we're both entrepreneurs and we're full of ideas. So if a company is starting off and they're opening up would you say prematurely open up divisions so because they have an idea and they want to pursue
Absolutely.
a thing, right? They're kind of revenuing out maybe in another area, they get another idea. How does that take away from the core business before it's ready?
If the core business is in the incubation stage,
Mm-hmm.
and it is not a company that has endured cycles and is generating revenue consistently, then what you're doing is you're taking the focus and the resources off of that business, and moving them to something else that might be. And so what you're doing is you're taking time, capital, as well as expertise away
Time,
from
capital, expertise.
away from what you could be focusing on and building it. Absolutely, I believe in diversifying, have other ventures and whatnot, but what we have to do is we have to ensure that the business is set up, the foundation is set up properly,
Mm-hmm.
that is endured a couple cycles, that it has the right leadership team in place, that it has its standard operating procedures, um, before you look at some sort of R&D, research and development, in a different area.
Mm-hmm.
Because the last thing that you want to do is when you're ramping up this new business, you're not prepared for some of the changes, and you've already taken that capital and put it into another venture. Now you're losing on both of them because you're not able to penetrate the market.
Mm. I was re-listening to. I've read this book a long time ago, The Science of Getting Rich. Now this is, I mean, some might people think it's like, woo, right? But Wallace D. Waddles, back in the day, wrote this book, The Science of Getting Rich, and he talked a lot about mindset, and he talked a lot about knowing what to do. He said in there, and I'm not quoting this directly, but he talked about why stuff fails is because of lack of focus,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And
Lack of focus.
you look at anything in your life, when you start taking the resources away. So if you haven't built that leadership team, if you haven't uh, groomed someone and they're capable in taking over that other venture, and you start shifting your time and resources and your talent over to this new venture, you're stealing from that business.
Mm.
Um, because they're both still in this incubation stage. And so we do this a lot as business owners. We'll start something, and
Is that self-sabotage, John? Would you characterize it as self-sabotage?
i I think in indirectly, I think it's not meant to be like that. I think we truly believe that we could do all of these things at once, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and be effective at once. But if I'm watching TV, eating dinner, and while I'm on the treadmill, if I'm doing all three of those things together, that's a disaster waiting to happen.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
and that's kind of what it's like when you don't have somebody focused on that core. You have to be consistent. You have to put that time, that energy, and the money has to keep going into that business. until it proves itself.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And that's kind of hard to know too, right? I mean, we hear this all the time, and we talked a little bit about this off mic. When we talk to entrepreneurs and we're talking about scaling, right? And we had mentioned that, or you had mentioned that they don't oftentimes know what that means, or they're scared, right?
mhm.
And I suggested that fear might be because it's a responsibility. If I scale this business and grow it, then that means it's going to take more of my time.
Hmm.
And to some degree, I think people want that lifestyle business, which is nothing wrong with that, but they don't really want to have it take away from other stuff that they're doing. And that's an interesting fork in the road, isn't it?
It is, because I think that most business owners who are just emerging, they're new to business. They have this idea on what that means to them.
Mm-hmm.
But in all actuality, if you have a successful business, if you grow a successful business, you'll have the resources to be able to invest in new talent, in training that new talent, in making sure that you have systems set up. And when you do that, you're actually not the person that is in charge of every single thing. Right now, when you start a business, when you're launching, you're doing everything. So what happens is this individual thinks, well, in my mind, I'm doing everything right now. So if I'm
Mm-hmm.
scaling,
I'm gonna have
I'm
to do
doing,
more.
yeah, and I'm doing all of that by myself, which is absolutely not true. Because when you have more resources more capital coming in, you're able to invest that into other resources, so you can focus better, and your team members will be able to focus on their niche, whatever,
Sure. Yeah.
whether that's accounting or whether that's marketing, and you're not doing all of these things by yourself.
I tell you, John, one of the best books I read that speaks to this, and I'm going to put something up on screen here, so forgive me for looking away, everybody. But one of the best books I read on this was called Ready, Fire, Aim.
Hmm.
Oh my God. And I got it in the car. I must have listened to this thing maybe, 100 times, because in it, he talks about the stages that you should be doing things and at what stage you should be doing those things, right? And he broke it down as if it were a child growing up. At this age, you should be doing this. At this age, doing this. And then he got to the point where there's a point at which you need to get out of the way, bring in the MBAs, right? Because they'll help professionalize your business, and then they'll be so totally different than you in how they think and how they process things. He talks about being the conceptualizer, the one that did a lot of stuff. People were answering to you, reporting to you. And then he talks about a point at which you have to have people reporting to people you've put in place, doing it
it
like that, right?
That's
And
exactly it. And there's a lot of personal philosophies and beliefs and misconceptions, but you can do this the right way. I hear, and these are just excuses. Well, I'll have to do everything myself because I don't trust anyone else. Well, that's
yeah,
an issue with you.
self-sabotage, right?
That's not saying that they're not capable people, because there are more capable people out there than you for each of those niches.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
And so it gives you the chance to step back and look at your business holistically, while you have these specialists, these little cardiac surgeons all over the place, focusing on their niche.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so important, John. You said something, and that's difficult sometimes as a personality, right? And that's why when we came in and started our venture, we did some, hey, look, let me understand your personality a little bit, right? Did a couple of personality tests, and there's some deeper ones that we can actually go into to understand who you're dealing with, right? And if you have some of those same tendencies, then you need to hire to what you don't have, right?
Absolutely.
And that becomes a frustration, especially when you have two people or two organizations coming together and they all have their own thing, right? They're smart in what they do. And so they come together and it says, okay, we really enjoy the energy that you provide in this particular area and the things that you do on the side, right? So let's bring our talents together. But eventually they're in there mingling and they're kind of going, okay, well, we do it like this because we're a machine, we're a system. And you may have that entrepreneur that like, look, I'm a startup genius. So we don't do bureaucracy. We do it like this. We cut right through stuff. And that kind of can be a potential conflict, right? So as I was thinking about this book here, it's called Ready, Fire, Aim by Michael Masterson, 0 to 100 million in no time flat. And he talks about those stages, 0 to this many million, then from this many million to the next. And at each one of those stages, how you have to change and grow and be different, right? So I wonder, as we talk about how this Greensill Capital had all of these little what they call time bombs in their business, and we start thinking about as companies are creating their thing, creating these potential time bombs. I look at one, like you said, as being if we can't, if we're opening up to these too many divisions and we can't make decisions on things because we got a new shiny thing that just came in, right? That we won't time bomb number one. It doesn't have to be time, but it could be a bomb in the business, right? It is not focusing. I know I suffer from it. And oh my goodness gracious, when I do concentrate on a thing, it just works. When I don't, it just becomes a mess. You're doing, and this is what Wallace D. Wattles talked about in The Science of Growing Rich. He says the cause of failure is doing too many things in an inefficient manner.
Mm.
Like we're trying to juggle and we're doing them inefficiently.
It just look at, I mean, just take your personal life as an example. When you become unbalanced
Yeah.
in a certain way, and especially when you're starting something, it requires more attention.
Yeah.
And so there you're gonna set your scales off a little bit.
That's
And
man. So as you guys are listening out there and we're masterminding on this, it just came to us that how can this company be so, I mean, there was so much stuff riding on this. They were going to IPO at $40 billion and to go bankrupt. Now there's some things that happen in there. There are some, um, they must have noticed there was an insurance company that refused to insure them. And then the next day, or I think within a week, they filed bankruptcy, right? They must have saw something, you know, they started seeing that there's cracks in the foundation of this business here. When they start looking in there and it says, oh, if this went wrong, time bomb, that could be bad for your business. Oh, if this went wrong, that could be bad for your business. And we all know the pandemic of 2020, a lot of stuff went wrong in a lot of people's businesses. And there was so many time bombs in those businesses that they just went bust, right? I was reading about these two entrepreneurs, John. I want to turn you on to these guys. One in the internet space, he was crushing it, and now people are like they thought he was a scam, right? Because the what how he made his money, and but he was very successful at making that money, and he was one of the largest advertisers on Google and Facebook. But anyway, so now what he's done is he connected with another guy, and they're going and buying distressed retail spaces or
mm,
retail companies. And one of the companies they bought, oh my gosh, I can't think of the name of it right now, but it had did like $1.6 billion. They went from $1.6 billion to now being bought up for pennies on the dollars by this new collaboration. Right. And the new collaboration is called I think it's called Rev Retail Ventures or something like that. It's with Alex Murr and Ty Lopez. Right now, people have heard Ty Lopez. That's the Ferrari in my car guy, a Ferrari in my garage guy. Right? We've seen Ty Lopez, but now he says, "Hey, they bought Radio Shack." They bought Steinmart, Linens and Things. They are buying these companies and taking them online. Now that's his domain, right? And Alex Murr, he used to start a company a week until they found one that worked. And then he ended up, after 10 years, selling it for 200 and 300. It was 300 million dollars net of cash. You know what I mean? So these guys have been in the startup game, but now they're looking at this space that is just being totally disrupted and says, hey, let's take them and put them to where they belong. And that's online because they have a brand. You see what I mean? But I think about the companies that went bankrupt. Those were, oh my gosh, they had a whole bunch of bombs in the business. And that bomb number one, not being in the space where people are. And that's online. And that's the same thing that happened to Blockbuster, right? They weren't in the space where people were going. People were saying, you know what? I don't want to go into a spot. I want to be able to download this thing and stay at home. I don't like getting fees, so I want to do it a certain way. And they got Netflixed. I love using that as a verb. They got Netflixed. So as you think about your business, is your business going to be Netflixed? Does it have a whole bunch of bombs in it? And if it does, how do you diffuse them?
And for those of you that don't know, Ty and Alex, they're the ones who came up with Mentor Box a handful of years ago.
Yeah.
And it started mostly as an actual physical box that would include a few books, a few laminated, really nice put together guides, and a zip drive every month. But they have transitioned more into that digital space and offering their material in that digital space instead of
and that's and it becomes a scalable business, right? So that's when we start thinking about everybody scale. Well, what is it that I can do that if the business grew, I have all of the inputs in place that it doesn't crack at the seams, right? That it can scale up, if you will, as demand goes up, that you can still deliver. That's why I went 3 years ago, I went 100% digital in all the stuff that the stuff that I presented. Doing books. I stopped going to fairs and selling my books, with a table. I stopped going to those book selling events, getting a whole bunch of books shipped to me, because I started thinking about this. Wait a minute, I'm trading time for dollars here. I had to lug all those books. Right. And you've heard this before on another podcast. One day my cart fell over and the books got dirty. Can I sell those books now? Well, at a big discount, but now you got dirt stain on it. And I started thinking, this is garbage. I can't keep doing this. And I says, I'm not writing another book if it's not digital. You can get it on your iPad. You can get it on your Amazon Kindle, but you're getting it digitally. Right? Or you can download it as a PDF. And that's what I do now, is do it in that particular way. Right? And then I says, well, I want to create courses, and every single one of those courses will be digital. So that became the scale moment. So think about your business. Is it just a bomb waiting to go off, or do you have all these bombs in there? And start saying, how can I diffuse those with what you already have? And I say with what you already have access to the internet. You already have access to going digital. Right? And then John, when we decided to do Entre Hustler Box and all things related to Entre Hustler, we says we're going to make this digital. So our newsletter, guess what? That comes digitally. Right? How we our revenue streams, it's going to be digital. How we get paid, digital. Right? Don't be sending us no paper checks. You know what I mean? So that becomes our scale moment too, because we're finding that all these things that can get in the way of people getting their material. What if you have a scare at the post office or whatever, and they can't get your stuff out? Or as we found with the COVID situation, Well, guess what? It affected a lot of stuff because now people don't want to deal with the mail,
Mhm.
and people within in the post office, they get sick or whatever it is, and now everything's affected. So forget that, man. Create what you can in a scalable manner, right? Diffuse those time bombs. If you're here's another one, John. So debt to your company. 2020 wiping out companies.
Absolutely. And over leveraging debt. I mean, there's going to be a certain amount of debt to most companies unless you're 100% online, because you talked earlier about APs. You're 30, 60, 90, 120 days out. So there could be a line of credit that helps you bridge those gaps on
Right.
on when you're bringing in that revenue, depending on the type of business that you're in. But what we see a lot of times, and number one reason for businesses closing is financial issues, not sustainable financially. And you talk
Or
about,
spread too thin, like we
yep.
talked about earlier.
And you talk about 90% of businesses fail by 10 years. And that's the cause. So that is important. On one hand, you need access to capital. On the other hand, you don't want to over leverage and have more debt than you do assets. And so, and when you do that, it's just like you being upside down in your home. You owe more on your home, or you owe more on your vehicle uh, than it's worth.
Yeah, yeah,
And
you're upside down.
it's just, and that's a losing proposition. Um, if something happens and you get in a car accident, chances are your insurance company says to you, "Hey, this car was only worth $2,000, but you owe $5,000 on it."
Yeah.
Um, so you have a difference, and we see a lot of a lot of times negative equity um, being transferred over.
That's interesting that you say that, John. When I'll never forget, I had this contractor that I've seen his work. I really liked the way he did his stuff, man. I mean, he was a machine, the way he would come and do your home, and as fast as he would do it. He had a little crew. Well, this guy goes down with a back injury.
Mhm.
Now, get this. He goes down with a back injury and his business goes away, which I thought, man, he was not in a scalable situation simply because he was the business. And I thought, well, even if you got a back injury, you could sit, maybe lay down if you have to lay down and direct the crew, right? If he had a staff that he had trained up, in other words, creating some systems,
Mhm.
then he could send them out. I don't care. Maybe he, sends a picture and says, "Hey, I'm laid up with a back injury, but I got my crew that's been working with me and I've directed them to take pictures of the house." And I thought, man, this guy his whole business is gone.
And so that's funny you mentioned that. My wife's friend, her husband owns a roofing company, and a few years ago he fell off a roof and he broke his back,
Mm,
and it was pretty serious. But his business still was operational and it still thrived because he had transitioned out of being that day laborer,
mhm.
that was up on the roof every day and doing all of the work, to more of overseeing operations. Well, he could oversee the books and planning
Mhm.
and sales and marketing and whatnot from a lounge chair in his living room. He didn't have to go.
So he diffused the bomb before it blew up.
Right. And most individuals do not do that with their business, and it's a fear thing too. And here it is. The fear is not wanting to let go. It's having control of everything, not thinking that anybody else can do it but you only trust yourself. And this is a myth. It's such a myth. If you're a parent, it's that mindset, well, hey, I'm never going to go out on a date night, or I'm never going to go to work because I don't trust anybody else with my kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And it's
absolutely.
like, that's the mentality. And which is going to drive you crazy because you're not getting the reprieve that you need. Well, it's the same thing in your business. Um, and, and I talk about other things too. When you have a business and you've set up these structures, and you have key employees in place, and you're growing to a certain point, well, now it's time that you need to have some key employee insurance policies.
Yeah.
So what happens if Jimmy over there, your
Well, this is
business,
a diffuse the bomb moment, everybody.
yeah, what happens if Jimmy over there gets in a car accident and doesn't make it, and you have to replace him? Where are the funds going to come to replace him, and who's going to step in the interim? And so now you have a $500,000 policy that'll help you supplement, that
Don't
you're
they call
losing
that
Jimmy.
key person?
Yep, key
Key
person
person
life policy.
insurance.
Mhm.
All right,
Those
so that's a bomb diffuser. Awesome. I love
it is,
that.
yep, very much a bomb diffuser. So I've had these before with business partners where we would each have $1 million policy on us, but it was also a way of, hey, if something happens to one of these owners, then their spouse could be bought out of the business,
Right. Yeah.
and that capital be there instantly. So hey, I'm going to give that to Jimmy's wife. I'm just going to buy Jimmy's
And
share
that's because of the
of the
insurance
business.
policy.
Absolutely.
And that's interesting that you say that. Now, depending on what stage you're in, everyone, we don't expect that a startup would have that, right? Because a startup is like, look, I don't know what I'm doing yet. I don't have a business yet. I'm kind of determining if this concept will work. So maybe not at the startup stage, but is there a stage that you've recognized, John, in your travels that is the best to start thinking about that way?
Absolutely. I always believe that you're ahead of the mark. This isn't catch up, So if you're planning on taking your business to the next level, if you're planning on it not being a hobby, not being something that you just do at craft shows on the weekend,
Mhm.
then you need to start at that early stage. And that starts with SOPs, standard operating procedures, and
Mhm.
making sure that you have those listed. And that means mentoring the right people. It doesn't have to start with capital. If your business isn't worth anything, then what are you going to get insurance on? But when your business starts becoming of value, that's when you need to look at, hey, and then you have other players in the game as well. Hey, it's not just me, and I'm a sole entrepreneur and I don't have a family or anything, but it's me and my family, and I'm growing this business, and I have $50,000 in inventory, and I'm getting new contracts every day. Well, how do we transition if something were to happen to you, that your spouse would be able to take that business and
Yeah.
have it worth something, because you would hate for something to happen to you, and your spouse is sitting in the house with, well, actually she loses the house because she can't pay the bills, and on top of that she has 50,000 in inventory sitting in the basement that she donates to Goodwill.
Mhm.
You want to be able to use that towards in giving your spouse, your children, whoever it is in your life, some reprieve.
I love that. So these are just we're talking about this because when we read that article about Greensill Capital, everybody, and we were shaking our head. That was of course at high level, right? IPOing at $40 billion, or the potential to IPO at $40 billion, and then going bankrupt when a couple of things happen. Wow, right? And now just leaving towns and investors on the hook for what went wrong with that company. And we started thinking, well, on a smaller level, how can we come in and say, hey, we need to talk about taking a look at what you believe might be some some bombs in your company. It could be time bombs if you got stuff that's that's you borrowed on time, let's say, or it could be other kind of bombs, not having certain systems. And I'm going to say the systems in place to run your business. And one thing I know about John, and I appreciate about John, is that, you know, he'll have a business plan all the way planned all the way out. Not necessarily on the business plan side, but he'll have some, hey, look, this is what we need to do. Here's some things to consider. And that really will help you. That's the standard operating procedure when you're running your business, because you know every single day what you should be doing, right? It's like, okay, did I do this thing on the list related to the business? Yes or no? Didn't do it then, right? So that really helps you think through things. Otherwise, you wake up sometime, especially when you're just starting off, and you don't know what to do next. You're kind of going, well, maybe I ought to do this. Oh, well, this is easier to do, so maybe I should go and do that. And now you're not really getting the kind of traction that you should be getting in your business. When I'm doing some consulting with companies and small businesses, that's exactly what I come across all the time, John. I don't know what to do next. And I'll
And
go,
that's,
okay, well, let me see your strategic plan. I don't have one.
yep, it's that failure to act, do something. And that, you and I talked about this earlier, Randy, that a lot of times, you know, when you start a process, when you're going through this inception stage, that it's, you take a piece of paper out and you're drawing a web and you're trying to connect the dots. Start there. You don't start with 100-page business plan,
Right.
but start putting your vision down and working yourself into that. Whether that's you going to the Small Business Development Center and using some of their free resources, um, and then from there maybe getting a score mentor or whatever that entails. You have to start. It's not good enough to say, well, I need to do that and just never act upon it, because
Right.
people say I need to do that, and it's 3 years later. Well, wow.
Yeah. And we've seen that, right? We talked about that, I think, on one of our last podcasts. Um, Brilliant people, brilliant ideas, no action. Drives me nuts. I mean, and I know it drives you nuts when you see companies come in and says, I don't know what to do next. Well, let's start something.
Hmm.
And my claim to fame is I make sure that companies get going. There's really no excuse. I tell them, look, by the end of the week, in fact, when I got an entrepreneur right now, it says in 10 days, and she was like, 10 day in 10 days, you will have your first product up and out there testing the marketplace. I
and
mean,
what and what does
10
it hurt?
days.
Tell me the harm in throwing a landing page out there. What are
Right.
you risking?
Right.
Are you and you have a really good philosophy, Randy, and I've thought a lot about this. Is you have this, hey, I'm always in this state of learning. I'm experimenting. So if it doesn't go the way that I want it to go, well, I'm just learning from an experiment.
Yeah.
So take that. I mean, use that if that makes you comfortable. Use that type of mindset, but you got to do something. You can't just keep putting it off, keep putting it off, keep putting it
Right.
off, and thinking that it's going to happen.
And because it'll blow up, John.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And this is what our big conversation today is: diffusing those bombs in your business and the bombs that'll make it go bust. That's the key thing. Doing something, looking at that and going, that's going to be a problem, right? And developing, a moat around it, a degree of security. If that person left, what will I do? Well, insure against that,
Mm-hmm.
either by giving them a piece of the company or whatever it is you got to do to make them stay interested, or continually identifying who would replace them.
Absolutely.
Who would
And
replace them?
and this is what good companies do. what family companies that last for generations and grow and sustain, they have a really good plan. And they're not, yes, of course there's going to be emotional and things like that and
Mhm,
changes going on, but
mhm.
at least you're prepared for the business part of it.
Right. And we
um,
can't stress that enough,
and
everybody.
and you're not going to be you may not be in a good spot personally, but would you want to be not in a good spot both personally and with
Yeah.
the business as well? And then you have that responsibility, especially if you're employing people, um, that, hey, you know what, I can't meet the obligations because I'm not emotionally present and I didn't plan this out. I don't know what to do in this scenario. I'm lost. um, I don't have the money to hire somebody else and bring them in. I don't have
You're
the money
burning
to
out.
buy out my partner's spouse because uh, I didn't save. I don't have anything there to. So now you're hiring somebody new, you're paying them expenses, and then you're paying your former partner's spouse because you she still or he still owns a share of that company
Right.
and is due part of that revenue.
This is, I'm glad you brought up the part about emotional states too, right? Um, Working yourself to death, working yourself to ill health, working yourself to, mental exhaustion. Those days are dead, man. There's no place for that. And I was talking to a buddy of mine. He says, "Man, he has a spot that he goes to, and he says he takes out his blanket and his lawn chair. Right now it's winter time here or it's just becoming spring, so it's still a little cold. And he says I just sit there and think
Hmm.
or exist, right? And we talked a lot about dopamine detoxes, right, where you just don't do anything electronic. You just sit and don't turn nothing on, no phone, no nothing, not even reading books. You just let your mind reset. I don't mind telling you guys, I'll take a 2 hour bath on you in a minute. I don't mind as a guy saying, "Yep, I get me some bubbles. I figure that out, right? They don't last that long, but I got a little tip, and I will sit there and take a relaxing moment. That's self care. We're seeing so many problems in the entrepreneurial community surrounding mental health because of our emotional states, right? And we have to do everything we can to stay as up as possible. Now, there's already a roller coaster going on. You got to juggle so much family responsibilities, business family responsibilities, earning a living, all the other associated things that comes with starting stuff, and it affects your emotions. It does. It just is a part of that. Now, what are you doing to protect yourself? That's a bomb waiting to go off. And the bomb is you. You start a venture and you go down on your partner and your employees and your new customers. I've seen it happen, John,
Hmm.
where they start something great and it's like they disappear. We've seen YouTubers that get really, at least I have, YouTubers get really, really popular and they disappear. Why? Because they had to get themselves together. They weren't prepared to get the attention that was coming from the thing they were doing. They wanted the money, then now the attention and all that comes with that, the pulls on your time, people saying, protect this, do that. Now you got a little conglomerate of people asking you to do this. Can you go and make this appearance? Can you go over here? And you just wanted to get out there and build a nice little following, and become an influencer, and then they disappear. It's like, where were they? Well, they were taking a mental break,
Hmm.
right? And it's so incredible what's happening in this space, man. And look, personally, I have my ups and downs when it comes to business. And it's usually when I have an idea that something should have worked out and it doesn't. In my mind, it was beautiful. It was all planned out. It should have worked and it doesn't. You get crickets. The market didn't care. Right. And that will, take you into a space, right? A blue mood. I call it the blue moods of business. Right. So what are you doing to protect yourself? Who are you talking to? What are you doing for self-care? Because if that bomb goes off, it affects not just you, it affects all this other stuff. So think about that. So we talked about the bombs in the business. We've talked financial, right? We talked about if the employees disappear on you, getting some key person insurance. We talked about the emotional state. John, is there one other area that we can share? We don't want to go too deep into this because, again, we were just inspired by what was happening over here with this company. It's like, how could this happen? Right. Is there another area that we could talk about that could be a potential bomb and then how to diffuse it?
Absolutely. A lot of things, a lot of times, and I've seen this. I had a neighbor once, and he owned an electrical company, and it wasn't just a mom and pop company, but they hired a significant amount of individuals. And you remember Y2K, Randy?
Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah.
And
And everybody thought that things were just going to go to heck in a
that's
handbasket, right?
right. His operations manager invested in generators and bought a whole warehouse full of generators. Thinking,
The internet's going to go
yep,
down.
yep. And so it's one of those
Y2K. Yes, I
uh,
do.
misreading the market and making decisions like that just are simply beyond reason. And we can all talk ourselves into these crazy things. We think we can do this, we think we can do that, but if something is just off, and you feel like it's a gamble and the odds are against you, I would say let's not probably look in that, or at least seek some other counsel.
That's a
And
big one right now,
yeah,
right?
I think that we don't like to do that. You know why? Because if I seek somebody's counsel, they might talk me out of something. They might say, "Hey, John, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard," and
Right.
we don't
Dude,
want our feelings hurt. And
that's big.
we have to think about, well, is it about my feelings?
That's ego
Or
stuff, though, isn't
yeah,
it?
it is, but we have it, all of us have it, especially when we're entrepreneurs. We think we can do anything, and we don't need um, anyone else. And that's why we don't like to that's why a lot of business owners don't like to partner. That's why a lot of small business owners um, don't entrust anybody
Yeah.
with their secrets, and they're working 90 hours a week because, hey, my my other leaders in the company, they can't know what's in the secret sauce, because I'm afraid they're going to leave and go somewhere to my competition. Well, you're setting yourself up
Yeah.
uh, for the failure. And
That's, man, that's a big one. Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, just
I like that.
making sure
Mistiming the
you're
market.
you're making, yeah, the mistiming the seek wise counsel.
Yeah. Mistime. And again, think about that. If you're mistiming the market and you're not talking with other folks, right, because of some ego block. And you're right, John, it does happen to all of us. Now, entrepreneurs, you're listening to this. Ask yourself a question. Has it ever happened to you? Right? Have you ever been, you had a whiz bang idea and somebody comes and says, "Hey, they're not doing videotape anymore, right?"
Mm-hmm.
That's the videotape moment. It's like your idea is old and somebody tells you it's old, and therefore you now have to rethink something totally else. That's a hit. Or someone says, "Yeah, your approach is off." I was helping somebody, and this is something that it was a business moment, but it was in the construction space. And it was just a project that they wanted to do at home. So they wanted to borrow my drill. Right.
Mm.
So I says, hey, no problem. I'll let you borrow my drill. I says, now they wanted to borrow my battery powered drill. And I was like, nope, you cannot. You can have this one right here that you plug into the wall, right? You know what I mean? Because this one is off limits. Because I've just seen too many times where stuff comes back broke. So I says, okay, you can use this one. Now I came over and he was telling me about the project. Now, being experienced in certain areas, you can see the flaws and you want to say something about that, but you don't want to kill this person's spirit for what they're doing. Right. And then you don't want to do too much helping. Because, when I was leaving, my wife says, well, why didn't you just help? I says, because they have to go through this process themselves to determine the efficiencies that they'll discover as they're going through it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I told him a couple of times, I says, well, may I make a suggestion? If you try this, that will save you a lot on this. And it's like, oh, that's a good idea. And he was like, thanks, I appreciate that. Right. So without going too far. And then at the same time, without diving in and saying, well, I'll do the work with you, because now I have to always consider my time. I would have spent thousands of dollars in time helping versus, hey, and it's not my idea. You see my point here? That person's, and they never asked me, hey, will you help me? Now that's where seeking wise counsel, John, like you says, is being able to come to somebody and says, will you help me? People will oftentimes help you maybe by telling you. So a couple of things I did. Once he had mentioned that, well, I want to get a countertop. I says, try getting MDF, because MDF is, it's easier to manipulate. It doesn't cost as much. You know what I mean? You can paint it and all that kind of stuff, depending on what you can't stain it, but you can paint, the little things like that. Right. And I says, make sure you get some clips that you can clip it onto. So these are just kind of I can give you some consulting on this, but I'm not coming over there putting my time into it, because it would cost me too much to do that. Right. Especially when it's their idea.
Mm-hmm.
You go and start doing it your way. And guess what? They're sitting over there going, I didn't learn a thing, because you went over there and did that thing for them. So when John talks about seeking counsel, get outside of your own head. This is so key. I was listening to Alex Murr the other day, and he was on a podcast, and he talked about that. He says, getting outside of yourself. He says, you think the idea is in you. It's not. And it's something, oh my gosh, John, I can't tell you how hard this was for me a year ago to stop creating things I wanted to create.
Mm.
In my mind, hey, this is a problem, but that's your mind. The marketplace may say, it ain't a problem for us. And started then going into the marketplace seeking problems to solve. The other way around, right? That's a whole different perspective. One is you spend time creating a product, a service, and the market don't care. It's meh. Versus going out there saying, oh, I see 5 problems that are not solved. I see a gap here. And then going creating the product based on that. Creating the service based on that. Man, oh man, oh man. It is, I'm telling you, light years difference and adoption of your product that happens when you do it that way. Right. So now I'll go out and keyword research something, SEO, or not SEO, but keyword research something to find out what people are asking, what their frustrations are, going out there doing that. Right. And sometimes that kernel of an idea, John, comes from, I got a problem with something. And I'm going, I wonder if, 50,000 other people may have that problem. Because now maybe you got a sustainable business. And then producing something not only to solve my own problem, right? Again, see what I just said there? Solve my own problem. Not put something out because I have a passion for it. No, other way around. And then seeing if I got a marketplace for it and doing it based on that. Changed everything for me. Stopped me from, committing dollars and times to stuff that didn't work. You get enough of those launching something and it's crickets, you'll learn very quickly, man, that was a year wasted. You know what I mean? Or a year I got to now recoup in some other kind of way, blah, 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 from the product. So anyway, that's a time bomb that we hope that as you're listening to us, you can start diffusing. What we've laid out here are these little things in your business that could go boom, solving them now before it blows up your business. We hope that's helped you a little bit, everybody. John, you want to close with anything, or what can we tell our entrepreneurs that are listening that one last thing to consider before we go?
I think of it as we often use this term, and business owners do. I hear them. This is my baby. Well, think of it as this is your baby. So, how are you planned? What would you do if this was actually your physical child? So would you not leave instructions if a babysitter came over on what to do, what to feed, and how things worked, what my child's allergies are, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Well, think about the same thing in entering your business. That if this is truly your baby, then you're going to prepare like it is your baby.
That's good. That's good. So prepare, have a plan, have a checklist. Every single day, something should be being checked off to relative to that business. And this is a big one. This is what I'm going to leave you guys with is if in the business there isn't immediately a way to revenue.
Mm-hmm.
I see this a lot, John. I see a whole bunch of plans, but I see nothing about making money. And it drives me bananas, and it's very tough to have that talk with an entrepreneur that has done everything else but go find customers to pay them for their product. A way to revenue. And it is now what I start off with when I'm doing an entrepreneur, when I'm doing any kind of consulting with anybody, right? Or giving any kind of advice about this. I say, all right, show me who you're going to sell your product to. That's it. Let's start there. It's like, well, I got this logo. I don't want to hear about the logo. Well, I got this. I don't want to hear about that either. Show me who you're going to sell your product to. Where'd you find them? So because what that is traffic. Right. And then we can start building a strategy. Okay. You found 50,000 people, 5,000 people, 500 people, 5 people. Now, where are they? Then you can build a strategy. Okay. What are they already looking at? Okay. That's competition. What are you going to put in front of them to kind of get them looking at your stuff? Okay. That's marketing. You see what I mean? Now you can step it down. But oftentimes it's everything else. Oh, I need to get my idea patented, right? I need to get it copied, I need to get it trademarked. No, you don't. You need to find a customer that'll buy it. That's one of the biggest time bombs is not having a way to revenue. That's it. Anyway, hopefully, guys, you've been able to listen in on what we were masterminding on today and get a few tips, get a few tricks on how to diffuse these time bombs, these bombs in your business before they go off. All right, John, thanks again, man, for coming in and, for us masterminding on this. We got to get over to Clubhouse and have another conversation. So if you guys want to go ahead, and we're going to be doing some stuff on Clubhouse. Typically, we'll try to do them right after we do the podcast, and you can see us there too. All right. Or he listened to us at least. Talk to you then.